At last, the fire left him, not all at once, and not mercifully. It peeled from Zarathoin in ragged ribbons, sloughing from his body like burning cloth torn loose by unseen hands. What had once been a dwarf of learning and standing drifted down at last into stillness amid the wreck of the great hall. Shelves collapsed inward in hissing ruin. Cinders floated in the smoky dark like dying stars. Somewhere above, timber cracked. Somewhere below, molten embers spat against old stone. But for the first time since they had entered the Whittier College, there was no screaming, no spellfire, no mad voice booming through the halls. Only silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Ezien broke it.
"Well,"
he said, peering through the settling smoke toward the blackened corpse,
"that seems like a fairly clear invitation."
Sariel, still breathing hard, turned his head.
An invitation to what?
"To loot him,"
Ezien said. Tavin wiped soot and blood from the back of one hand and looked down at the body with the calm practicality of a man who had already decided the answer.
That does seem reasonable.
Rowan planted the butt of his weapon against the stone and glanced from corpse to party with the weary expression of someone too tired to object, unless the objection really mattered. Sariel made a face.
I would like it noted for the record that I find this deeply distasteful.
"You used the man's reputation to buy a cloak this afternoon,"
Ezien said.
That was administrative theft.
Sariel replied.
This is corpse theft. There is a difference.
There really isn't,
said Tavin. There never was, in the end, much ceremony to victory. Survival, yes. Breathing, yes. But victory tended to smell like smoke and blood and burnt cloth, and more often than not, it was followed by grim accounting. So they knelt in the ashes around what remained of Zarathoin and learned what his madness had not entirely destroyed. The first thing they found was simple enough: coin. A pouch blackened by heat but not consumed, and within it 150 gold pieces that clinked together with a sound indecently cheerful for the setting. The second thing drew Rowan's eye immediately. His armor, much of it, seemed to be disintegrating even as they watched, runnels of ember light guttering through the seams before the metal collapsed into slag and brittle scale. But the warhammer remained. It lay beside the corpse as if fire itself had hesitated to touch it for too long. The head was squat and dwarven in make, etched with cracked runes glowing faintly from within. The haft was wrapped in scorched leather, polished smooth by long use. Rowan crouched and reached toward it.
"That feels very Rowan-coded,"
Ezien muttered. Rowan grunted.
I do not know what that means.
It means,
Sariel said,
that if any object in this room was fated to find its way into your hands, it was that one.
Rowan lifted it. Even through soot and ash, the weapon seemed sound, heavy and honest, and dangerous. Heat breathed off the runes in low pulses.
Careful.
Tavin said.
We have had a poor record with enchanted objects.
We have had a poor record with nearly everything,
Rowan replied. A brief examination was enough to tell them part of the truth, and only part. The hammer carried power. That much was plain. Fire lived in it still, contained within runes that had not entirely failed. It was no common weapon. But it would demand attunement before it yielded all its secrets.
So it might be cursed,
Sariel said.
So might the city,
Rowan answered, and slid the hammer into his keeping. The third thing they found was stranger. Clutched in one blackened hand was a compact leather notebook, dark with soot but intact. Tavin took that one, turning it over carefully. The outer pages had been charred, and the early entries, when he opened it, were neat and controlled. Much later, the lines grew crowded, frantic, cross-hatched with diagrams and references and cramped marginalia that seemed almost to claw at the page.
What does it say?
Sariel asked without turning. Tavin skimmed the opening pages.
Research notes,
He said.
Restricted review. Subject, the so-called Book of Bogentel. Delivered under unusual secrecy. Pages appear blank under mundane light. Arcane light, deep frost, and
He frowned.
several other methods attempted. No illusion detected. No curse identified by conventional means.
Conventional means.
Sariel repeated.
Excellent. Those are always the words one longs to hear.
There is a point
Taven said, flipping farther ahead.
where the writing changes. It becomes frantic. He was already slipping by then.
And can you read the rest?
Most of it is dwarvish.
Sariel spread his hands.
Tragic. We are surrounded by ancient dwarven mysteries and have somehow failed to bring a librarian.
They all looked, almost involuntarily, toward the ruined doorway where Aelwyn had vanished during the fight. Aelwyn, meanwhile, had found the book. She stood in a smaller chamber off the corridor, its stones heat-stained but less ravaged than the great hall. There was no pedestal, no warding circle, no locked case befitting an object for which men had already died. Bogentle's book lay open on the floorboards as though dropped in haste or cast aside in fear. Its pages looked blank, as they always had. Blank and waiting. She approached slowly, every sense alive. As she drew near, the pages changed. Ink rose from them, not written, revealed. It welled upward in branching lines and coiling runes, dark as water brought up from some depth that had never known sunlight. Shapes unfolded across the parchment in patterns too fluid to be holy language and too deliberate to be chaos. It was like watching memory surface in a mind not her own. Then, for one sharpened instant, a line in common emerged from among the runes.
The gate widens beneath the Keeper of Silence.
Aelwyn read it aloud without meaning to. The words seemed to cool the room around her. Behind the first line, more symbols moved, spiraling, overlaying one another like a dozen thoughts forced into the same narrow space. She narrowed her eyes and reached for magic. Not violently, not as an attack, but as one might lift a veil to see what stood behind it. When her spell touched the book, the runes shivered. The pages changed again. 3 headings appeared, pale and sudden and horribly clear. On Valanthe, my student, the forge below wave echo, concerning the black stone. And in the margin, jagged as if written in haste by a trembling hand, another warning wrote itself into being. If the shard awakens, do not trust the voices that speak with familiar mouths. Then, just as swiftly, it was gone. The writing melted back into blankness. The page returned to silence. Aelwyn closed the book at once and picked it up. When she rejoined the others, soot-streaked and breathing a little too carefully, all argument over coin and weapons stopped.
I found it,
She said. That got everyone's attention.
The actual book.
Sariel asked.
The actual book.
Ezien straightened.
Please tell me it was sitting on an altar, wrapped in chains, or floating in green light, or something equally satisfying.
It was on the floor.
That is less dramatic.
He admitted. Aelwyn did not smile. She told them exactly what she had seen. The first line about the gate and the Keeper of Silence, then the headings revealed by the spell, and at last the margin note.
If the shard awakens,
Taven repeated quietly.
do not trust the voices that speak with familiar mouths.
A strange little silence followed that. No one had forgotten the shard. No one had forgotten what it had done, what it had whispered, demanded, promised. No one had forgotten Taven under its influence, nor the voices that had already begun to wear familiar shapes.
Well,
Ezien said at last, because he was constitutionally incapable of allowing dread to stand unchallenged for too long.
that seems extremely bad.
It seems informative,
Said Rowan.
It can be both.
Sariel replied. They stood in the ruined corridor with Zarathoin's body cooling behind them. The warhammer now in Rowan's keeping, his journal in Taven's hands, and Bogentle's book hidden beneath Aelwyn's arm. It would have been an excellent time to leave. Instead, naturally, they argued.
We should go.
Aelwyn said first.
We could look around a little longer.
Said Ezien.
No.
Aelwyn said. Taven tilted his head.
There may yet be useful materials here.
Sariel turned on him.
We have the cursed book, the dead wizard, the notes of the dead wizard, and a city that may or may not be collapsing into occult paranoia around us. What more could you possibly want?
Ezien spread his hands.
Resources.
Loot.
Sariel translated.
Resources!
Ezien repeated with dignity.
We did, after all, just save the school.
By killing one of its scholars.
Rowan said.
Yes,
Said Ezien.
and in doing so prevented him from burning anyone else alive. I feel that entitles us to modest administrative compensation.
Tavin nodded once.
It is not theft if the city's continued survival benefits.
Sariel stared at both of them.
I am begging you to hear yourselves.
Aluin had already started toward the outer hall.
We are leaving.
That ought to have settled it. It did not, because then someone remembered the body.
What are we doing with Zarathoin?
Sariel asked.
Leaving him,
Said Rowan.
In the middle of a university?
they told us to kill him.
Rowan said.
I assumed they expected a body to result.
A little respect for the dead
Sariel said.
is not an outrageous notion.
He was trying to incinerate us from the ceiling.
Ezien replied.
He was also their colleague.
Sariel shot back. Tavin considered.
If we carry him out ourselves, it will be clumsy, conspicuous.
And revolting.
Aluin added.
I could conjure a horse.
Rowan offered. All three of them turned to stare at him.
A horse
Sariel said very carefully.
in the university.
Rowan frowned.
If needed.
No,
Aluin said more firmly this time.
we leave the body, we inform the guards, then we leave.
That finally held, so they made for the front. The doors were opened only after knocking and shouted identification. The outer barricade dragged back piece by nervous guards. Cool night air rushed in, carrying with it the smell of river water and the city beyond. And there, beyond the threshold, their unease sharpened. There were far more guards outside than there had been before. Not a handful, not a quarantine cordon. A mass of armed men under lantern light, enough to turn the college bridge into a choke point and to make every word spoken thereafter feel pre-weighed. A captain stepped forward, armor catching the light. Sariel gave him the plain version.
Zarathoin is dead. His body is in the central hall. He could not be talked down.
The captain nodded once.
Then you have done what was asked.
He did not move aside. Instead, he said,
I have orders that you are to come with us at once.
To the king?
Sariel asked.
Yes.
Aluin drew her pack a little closer against herself. Inside it, unseen, Bogenthal's book waited in utter silence. The others noticed. No one said a word about it. The city was already too interested in the book. Lord Neverember had made plain enough what he would do if the party laid hands on it. So when they were asked what they had found, they mentioned Zarathoin's notes. They mentioned the body. They did not mention the true prize. Not everyone went quietly. As the escort formed around them, Ezien muttered in thieves' cant to Sariel, quick as a wink. Too many guards. If this turns, somebody needs to stay loose. Sariel, catching on at once, lifted his voice theatrically toward the captain.
Well then, clearly victorious, we shall proceed in triumph. Behold us.
It was not his best work, but it was enough. Ezien slapped at his belt as if struck by sudden panic.
Ah, damn it! My knife. Sentimental knife. Threw it in there. Need it back.
Before the guards could make much of that, he was already half turning away in feigned irritation. Between Sariel's bluster and the confusion of movement, he managed to slip back through the threshold and vanish inside. By the time anyone thought to check, he was gone. The rest of them had no such luck. They were escorted into the city streets beneath far too many eyes, and not one of those eyes felt accidental. Ezien, on the other hand, took full advantage of being momentarily unaccounted for. He darted through the school's quieter chambers, while wizards and late-arriving guards began to converge elsewhere. In a lecture hall he found no treasure worth songs, but several curiosities worth pockets. A slender enchanted pointer that leapt from its shelf when touched, and began indicating things on a lecture board of its own accord. A second shorter wand or stick whose function he could not identify, and a set of decorative medallions from a display case that looked valuable enough to justify the trouble. Then, when one of the college wizards outside recognized him as The idiot. Ezien bowed to the insult, explained with total sincerity that he had only returned to retrieve a cherished knife, and persuaded them so thoroughly that they waved him along without question. He did not rejoin the party. Instead, he followed. The others, meanwhile, tried diplomacy before the castle. Sariel complained of fatigue. Tavin admitted to injury. Rowan, singed and smoke-darkened, merely looked the part. They suggested politely at first, and then with more persistence, that perhaps it would be wiser to meet the king in the morning. The captain responded by handing over healing potions.
That addresses the wounds.
Aelwyn said.
It does not address the fact that my soul is tired.
The captain stared at her.
The day has been long.
Tavin added.
We would rather not look like fools before your lord.
To everyone's surprise, the captain actually hesitated. Then he said,
Wait here.
and with the armed escort standing around them in the street, Captain Melis Venn strode into a nearby shop and emerged moments later with coffee. Hot, bitter, hastily procured coffee. He handed it out with the solemnity of a man distributing battlefield remedies. Tavin took his cup and looked at it as though it might be another test.
This will do little for my chakras.
What do your chakras require?
The captain asked.
Extended meditation.
You may rest once you are in the castle.
And so, holding coffee purchased from a side street shop by a city guard captain who refused to let them leave, the party continued on into Lord Neverember's hall. They found Nundro waiting there. That, more than anything, told them Neverember had been thinking several moves ahead. The dwarf stepped forward when he saw them, relief and uncertainty warring in equal measure across his face. Neverember explained it simply enough. If Talhandreth was indeed where their trail now led, then they might need someone who could read Old Dwarven. Nundro, owing them his life and Gundren's besides, had been brought to assist. Then the questions began. What had happened in the college? Zarathoin was dead, they said, mad beyond reason, dangerous beyond recovery. His body had been left within, and his notes recovered. They had done what was asked. Neverember listened with the grave stillness of a man already trying to measure the shape of the next disaster. And then, casually enough to make the words all the colder, he said,
If you had found Bogenthal's book, of course. I would have demanded it immediately.
No one answered too quickly. Aelwyn kept her face still. The king let the silence pass.
No matter, you are tired. You may rest in the castle tonight.
It was permission, but it did not feel like freedom. Their chambers were comfortable by almost any standard short of trust. Food was sent. Guards stood near enough outside the rooms to intervene if needed. Nundro remained with them, and once the door had shut, Sariel wasted no time. He cast his spell and looked. Some of the guards outside their room carried that same strange magical aura the party had noticed before in Neverwinter, an influence that clung to them without behaving like any ordinary curse. Nundro, notably, did not. Sariel tested the matter directly. On his way past one guard, he clapped the man lightly on the arm, as if in thanks, and slipped Remove Curse into the touch. Nothing. The aura remained.
It is not a simple curse,
Sariel reported once they were alone again.
but some of them are under compulsion. Not all. Enough.
And if the city searched the college after we left,
Aelwyn said, hand on her pack.
then those compelled guards may be searching for the book.
Nundro heard all this and looked more troubled by the minute. When pressed, he admitted Neverember seemed afraid. Truly afraid. Afraid of the guards who had gone mad, afraid of whatever was spreading from the wilds into Neverwinter, afraid of what the school's headmaster had seen and why he decided to travel to Talhandreth. That name settled over the room like a stone dropped into dark water. The goblin map had pointed there, the shards had pointed there. Now Neverwinter pointed there too. And then came Gundren. When they showed Nundro the letter, Gundren's hurried words, including that dreadful line about voices in the flame, the dwarf's face changed. Duty to Neverember fell away all at once before something older and simpler, fear for his brother. Still, before any decision about Gundren could be made, Nundro did what he had been brought there to do. He took Zarathoin's journal and began to read. What emerged from those pages was worse than nonsense, because it was coherent. Zarathoin had concluded that Bogenthal's book was not magical in the ordinary sense, nor divine. It was more like architecture, he wrote, a structure of meaning, a thing designed not merely to contain secrets, but to align them. The book does not open because it is read, one entry said. It opens when something near is true. Tal Handreth, he believed, was a concealed site of religious significance under Dumathoin. Ancient dwarven fortresses had not been built merely to hide treasure. Some had been raised to bury truths that should never again reach the world above. And the reopening of the Forge of Spells at Phandalin, Zarathoin suspected, might be tied to all of it. The book becoming readable, the disturbances, the old buried things shifting toward recognition. None of these, he wrote, might be separate problems at all. Later pages were more desperate. He dreamed of a stone door beneath black roots, already open a hand's width, with something pale standing patiently behind it. Apprentices suffered skull pressure merely by helping with diagrams. The headmaster urged caution. Zarathoin realized too late that the danger was not that the object corrupted the weak-minded. The danger was that it rewarded attention. It offered pattern to the curious. It made every answer feel one thought away. And then abruptly, the writing ended. No revelation, no triumph, just the edge of a sentence and silence. They decided to sleep in shifts. The book remained with Aluin. The black stone remained with Sariel. Neither object was to be left unwatched, and preferably never too close to the other. It was during Taven's watch that the voice returned. Not loudly, not with the full force that had once nearly bent him to it. Just a familiar pressure in the mind, a presence leaning close enough to be heard.
Take the book.
Taven sat upright at once.
No.
He whispered into the dark. Across from him, Sariel lifted his head.
What?
Not you.
Taven muttered.
The other voice.
Again the pressure came, again the demand, the same voice as the shard, or one so close in nature as to make no difference. It wanted the book. It wanted him to touch it, take it, bridge the gap. This time he did not move. This time he fought it. When he told Sariel what had happened, he made him drink from the strange water they had kept from before, the same water that had once helped break the shard's grip on him. It tasted foul now, but not impossibly so, not as if his whole body rejected it. He swallowed, shuddered, and listened. The voice was gone. So by morning they knew one thing for certain, if nothing else. The book and the stone were linked. Outside the castle, Ezien watched from a distance and, very sensibly for once, did not attempt to break into one of the most secure buildings in Neverwinter by himself. Instead he slept, rose before dawn, and took up watch again in case the rest of them were dragged out in chains. They were not. They were served breakfast. A cart was wheeled in with muffins and apple strudel and all the cheerful little indignities of noble hospitality. Then came another summons from Neverember. This second audience was shorter and sharper. He asked after the missing fifth companion. The party downplayed Ezien as a hireling, a goon, a man of no consequence fit neither for kings nor formal councils. Neverember accepted that without apparent offence. Then he spoke plainly. Zarathoin's death had confirmed what he most feared. Something foul was moving through Neverwinter. Not rumour, not isolated madness, a real threat already inside the city walls. And if Tal Handreth lay at the centre of the trail, then they must go there and get to the bottom of it, before whatever stirred beneath these events rose high enough to threaten the city itself. They would have access to the royal records. But through a thorough search of the college, Neverember said with visible frustration his men and the wizards had failed to locate Bogenthal's book. Again the party kept silent. Instead they offered Zarathoin's journal and Nundro's translations, enough truth to satisfy without surrendering the greater truth hidden in Aluin's pack. But Lord Neverember did not accept them. When they were finally released, Ezien was waiting outside the castle walls, sleep-rumpled and suspicious.
You are all disappointingly unchained,
he observed. Sariel handed him a muffin. Then they went to the royal library. The librarian, a narrow creature of dry temperament and minimal patience, had already found the map they wanted. Or rather, he informed them, the school's headmaster had found it for him the day before by barging in, rifling records, and doing half the poor man's work. The map itself was ancient enough that its edges cracked when unrolled, spidered with old mountain lines and annotations from different centuries. It placed Talhandreth in the Starmetal Hills. More troublingly, it confirmed that the headmaster had gone there as well, or intended to. So now the race had shape. They knew where to go. They knew others were already moving there. They knew the road by land would be slow. And they knew, with the kind of clarity that only bad planning can produce, that the fastest path would mean going back upriver. What followed might have been the most absurdly practical conversation of the entire affair. They discussed rowboats and quickly discarded them. They discussed horses and then remembered rivers. They discussed whether summoned animals could tow a craft upstream. Someone proposed, not entirely joking, a shark-pulled dinghy. Someone else asked for a sailboat. What they truly wanted, they decided, was something magical, something motorized, something that could move against current without requiring the whole party to labor at the oars like river convicts. Neverwinter, to its everlasting shame and credit, had exactly such a thing for sale. It was not a sensible boat. It was a lacquered pleasure barge. Long and painted in rich greens with curling gold leaf, it had a silk canopy, velvet-cushioned benches, polished fittings, and the deeply unserious air of a vessel built for wealthy idiots to drift in comfort while servants handled the effort. Most of the party stared at it in disbelief. Then they saw the stern. Mounted there in a semicircle were 6 gilded goose heads, each with glass-bright eyes and open beaks. The seller spread his hands proudly.
Enchanted wind propulsion.
The geese honked. Even worse, the thing worked. For 2,525 gold, the party purchased the ridiculous craft. For another 25, they were informed of its defects, because naturally it had defects. One of the great stern geese had what the seller called a lazy honk, and produced only half thrust, which meant the boat tended to veer if not constantly corrected. The heads needed resynchronizing once a month. Damp weather sometimes caused them to honk out of sequence, producing an alarming bucking motion. One had a tendency to pre-honk, resulting in false starts. The wind chambers accumulated feather-shaped soot and had to be scraped clean by hand. The aft runes occasionally inverted and produced suction instead of thrust, pulling loose belongings toward the stern in moments of deep inconvenience. And if, by some catastrophe of judgment, the operator engaged full power, what the seller referred to in a lowered voice as
Super honk.
the resulting speed might crack the timbers clean through. There was a long silence when he finished. Sariel looked at the others.
I think,
He said,
that this may be the finest purchase we have ever made.
Aelwyn closed her eyes. But time was short. Talhandreth waited somewhere ahead in the Starmetal Hills. The headmaster might already be on the way. Bogentle's book rested in secret among them, and Neverwinter had become too compromised a place to linger. So they cast off. The barge lurched away from the city quay in a chorus of enchanted honking, silk canopy trembling, velvet benches shivering, goose heads spitting invisible force into the morning air. It was too ornate, too expensive, too unstable, and too loud by half. It was, in other words, perfect for them. Behind them, Neverwinter receded into stone and smoke and uncertain loyalties. Before them lay the river, the Starmetal Hills, Talhandreth, the buried places of Dumathoin, and whatever pale thing waited behind the half-open door in Zarathoin's dream. And with every ridiculous, wind-driven, goose-propelled burst upstream, the party left the safety of answers behind and drove themselves toward the place where all of those scattered truths might finally recognize one another again.